from the very spot where the body of Nolan Wells was brought after it was recovered from the water. And his death, his mysterious death, has truly devastated this community. We're hearing now for the first time, Robin, from an eyewitness, a friend of Wells who was with him on that fateful July 4th boat trip.
I just know I've lost my best friend.
This morning, a friend of Nolan Wells, who was with the 18-year-old the day he was last seen alive, is sharing what he says happened during a July 4th boat trip to an isolated barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Trayston Shepard declined to speak with us on camera because he says he and his friends are getting threats.
We did no wrong here, and we don't understand how we're getting so much hate behind it. We all cared and loved Nolan, and nobody wanted to see Nolan die. Nobody wanted to see his life be taken so short.
Shepard addressed this viral video that investigators have been studying. Wells's parents worried it showed their son involved in a confrontation, but Shepard said that's him, not Wells.
That's the video I'm referring to. That's me yelling.
Shepard says he took a boat back from Horn Island in the late afternoon, but Wells stayed behind with a girl he had met.
They met that day, and it was kind of one of those things. It did come off that day that he really did like her, but that was the only time they'd ever hung out was at Horn Island on July 4th.
Investigators believe
Monday morning. A park ranger finds Nolan Wells face down in the water off Horn Island. The official word, drowning. Nothing more to investigate. But his family didn't accept that word. They flew his body 1,000 miles away for a second autopsy no Mississippi official could touch. His father says he was a strong swimmer. His phone was never found. So if this was truly an accident, why won't his family stop asking questions? Welcome to Hidden Motive Crime. Welcome back. If you're new here, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Today, we explore what happened in the case of Nolan Wells. To our returning viewers, here's the question we're sitting with today. If this really was an accident, why hasn't his family accepted that word? Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why they can't. Horn Island has no cell service, no stores, no way to call for help. Nolan Wells knew that when he stepped off the boat with his friends on July 4th. Hours later, that same boat left the island. Without him. Sheriff John Ledbetter says Nolan chose to stay behind, expecting a ride later. Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, whose own stepson was in that friend group, says the boat left early because it was taking on water. A volunteer search commander heard a third version entirely, that Nolan stayed behind to talk to a girl. 3 accounts, 1 island. They don't agree with each other. His phone was never recovered. By the end of this video, you'll have 7 questions about this case. And right now, not one of them has a clear answer. If your friend went quiet for hours on a trip with no signal, how long would you wait before you got worried? Nolan Xavier Wells graduated from Ocean Springs High School in 2025. By that summer, he'd already earned a spot as a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College, and he was gearing up to return for the season that fall. Football wasn't just something he played. It was something he was building toward. His mother, Christine Wansley, remembers the last night she saw him whole, July 3rd. He came home, and she made him salmon for dinner. Nothing unusual, nothing that felt like an ending. He was headed out to spend the night with friends before the holiday weekend. It was hug, kiss, and he left, she would later say. Those were the last ordinary words exchanged between a mother and her son. Those who knew Nolan described someone who avoided conflict. His mother has said he wasn't the type to get into arguments, let alone fights. He wasn't someone who went looking for trouble. That detail will matter later. Hold on to it. Trips to Horn Island weren't new for Nolan. According to his family, he'd been out there with friends before. This wasn't a reckless decision or a spontaneous risk. It was a routine. A place he knew, a trip he'd taken more than once and come home from every time. On the morning of July 4th, that routine looked no different than any other. A boat left a private dock near Ocean Springs, carrying Nolan and a group of friends toward 10 miles of open water. It was supposed to be one more ordinary holiday, one more trip to a beach he already knew. Horn Island itself offers no room for error. It's federally protected land, undeveloped, with no shelter, no store, and no cell signal anywhere on it. The only way on or off is by private boat. Once you're there until someone comes back for you. On the 4th of July, that isolation didn't mean the island was empty. Volunteers who took part in the search later described the beach that day as packed. Boats lined along the shore, crowds of people celebrating, some of them drinking. It was a holiday like any other coastal Mississippi family might spend it. But the water around Horn Island carries its own history. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind has said the currents on the island's northwestern end are strong enough that drownings have happened there many times over the years. It's beautiful. It's also unforgiving, in ways that aren't always visible from the shore. Nolan wasn't alone that day. He was with a group of friends, the same people who would later be the last known to see him. At this point in the story, none of them have been named a suspect in anything. No accusation has been made against any one person. What we know is simple. They arrived on the island together, and at some point before the day ended, that would no longer be true. Somewhere between the boats on the beach, the current beneath the water, and a group of friends who all knew each other, something shifted. Nobody yet agrees on when or why. But by the time the sun went down on July 4th, the boat that carried Nolan Wells out to Horn Island would carry him back without him on it. Around 3 p.m. on July 4th, Nolan Wells was last seen wearing blue swim trunks and sunglasses. Sometime after that, the boat that brought him to Horn Island left without him. Everyone agrees on that much. Nothing else lines up. Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter says Nolan chose to stay behind, expecting to catch a ride back with someone else later that afternoon. Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole tells a different story. Her stepson was one of the friends on that boat. According to her public account, the boat left around 4:30 p.m. Not because Nolan chose to stay, but because the boat itself was taking on water. Then there's a third account. Josh Gill, commander of the volunteer search group United Cajun Navy, says word reaching him was that Nolan stayed behind to talk to a girl. 3 explanations for the same 15 minutes. A sheriff, a judge with her own stepson inside the story, a volunteer commander repeating what he'd heard secondhand, and a sitting judge in Jackson County, the same county now running this investigation, publicly shaping the account of a case her own family has a direct connection to. 3 different explanations for the same 15 minutes. Which one would you trust, and why? What followed was silence. Hours passed with no contact, because there was no way to make contact. No signal reaches Horn Island. No one on that beach could call ahead, call back, or check in. Around 11 p.m. that night, a friend of Nolan's placed a call to the U.S. Coast Guard. The Coast Guard has confirmed that call took place, but says it did not require Coast Guard assistance. They haven't disclosed what was said, or why that determination was made. By then, the beach that had been packed hours earlier was emptying into darkness. Somewhere on or near that island, Nolan Wells was still unaccounted for, and through all of it, one detail remained constant. He didn't have his phone with him. Not that night, not the next day, not when his body was finally found. By 3 p.m. on July 4th, Nolan Wells had been last seen on the shore of Horn Island. By early evening, the boat that carried him there was gone. By 11 p.m., a call had gone out to the Coast Guard, a call that, by their own account, required no response. Overnight, there was no contact, no signal, no way for anyone to reach him or for him to reach anyone else. By the next morning, July 5th, Nolan hadn't come home. His family began raising the alarm. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department, alongside the Coast Guard and Mississippi's Department of Marine Resources, launched a search of the island and surrounding water. Coroner Bruce Lind has pointed to the currents on that stretch of coastline. Strong enough, he says, to have caused drownings there many times before. Attorney Ben Crump, representing the Wells family, has pushed back on that explanation, noting that Nolan was an experienced athlete who knew how to swim. What actually happened to Nolan Wells in the water off Horn Island is not something the public record can answer. Not yet. No one has claimed to know, and neither will we. Monday morning, July 6th, a National Park Service ranger walked the shoreline near the island's northwestern tip. That's where he found a body in the water, face down. The coroner would later confirm the swim trunks matched the ones Nolan was last photographed wearing. Formal identification came the following day, through dental records. There were no obvious signs of trauma on his body. Even so, the coroner ordered a full autopsy, citing what he called the uncertain circumstances surrounding the death. For Christine Wansley, the news came the way she'd feared it would. She confirmed her son's death publicly, writing that her family was devastated and that her heart was broken for the son who always found a way to uplift the people around him. The search for Nolan Wells brought together the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, the U.S. Coast Guard, Mississippi's Department of Marine Resources, and a volunteer group called the United Cajun Navy. By air and by water, they worked to cover 10 miles of open gulf and a shoreline that shifts with every tide. Early in the search, Sheriff John Ledbetter released a statement saying no foul play was suspected. That single phrase spread fast, and according to a former prosecutor who spoke to CNN about the case, it may have been a poor choice of words, one that led to widespread misunderstanding about what investigators actually meant. To the public, it sounded like a conclusion. To investigators, it may have simply meant there was no evidence of it yet. As scrutiny grew, so did the evidence under public examination. Attorney Ben Crump reposted a video that had already been circulating online. Video shot from another boat near the island, showing a group of people on the beach, with what appears to be an argument taking place among a smaller group within it. Crump has also spoken publicly about another detail, that Nolan appeared to be the only black person in his friend group's photos from that day. Reverend Al Sharpton addressed the case directly at a press conference, saying the circumstances didn't sit right with him, and adding that raising the question wasn't the same as making an accusation. The sheriff's office says its wording was misunderstood, not misleading. Do you believe that? As of the most recent reporting, this case remains open. No suspect has been named. No official cause of death has been released to the public. At the family's request, Nolan's body was flown to Washington, D.C., for an independent autopsy, conducted by a doctor with no connection to Mississippi law enforcement. Attorney Ben Crump says those results are expected soon. Meanwhile, the state's own toxicology results, tied to the original autopsy performed in Mississippi, remain pending. A process that can take 2 to 3 weeks or longer. Nothing here is resolved. No one has been charged. No one has confessed. What exists right now is a family waiting on 2 separate sets of answers. From 2 sets of doctors who don't agree on much, except that this case isn't finished yet. Since Nolan Wells was found, a GoFundMe set up for his family has raised more than $220,000. Strangers who never met him have kept his name in front of the public, long past the point most stories like this fade from the news cycle. That pressure has come from more than just donations. Volunteer searchers gave their time and equipment to comb the water around Horn Island. Reverend Al Sharpton stood at a podium and said the circumstances didn't sit right with him. And on social media, the questions surrounding this case have refused to go quiet. Through all of it, Nolan's family has stayed visible. Christine Wansley and Elmore Wansley haven't stepped back from public view. They've continued to ask, in public, for the same thing: transparency. Not speculation, not assumptions, just a clear account of what happened to their son. CNN's own reporting on this case has acknowledged something larger sitting underneath it, that Mississippi's history with cases involving black victims shapes how much trust the public extends to an official ruling, before that ruling is even final. That context doesn't decide what happened to Nolan, but it explains why so many people aren't willing to wait quietly for an answer they're not sure they'll be given honestly. So here is where we're left. Why did Nolan stay behind? When 3 different people tell 3 different versions of that choice. Why has no one been able to explain the missing phone? What is actually happening in the video showing an argument on that beach? Why did a sitting judge, with her own stepson inside this story, become one of the public voices shaping it? Why did the family feel they needed a second autopsy, 1,000 miles from home, just to trust the result? And in the hours between 3 p.m. and the moment his body was found, what actually happened to Nolan Wells? 7 questions, not one of them answered. What we do know is this: Nolan Wells was 18. He made his family salmon the night before he died and left them with a hug and a kiss. He avoided conflict. He worked toward a season he was excited to play. He was, by every account available to us, someone people liked being around. That's the part of this story that shouldn't get lost in the questions still left open. Here's the corrected closing with that added. This case is still unfolding. No suspect. No official cause of death. No independent autopsy results yet. Nolan's family is still waiting, the same as we are. If this video helped you understand what's actually known, and what still isn't, share it with someone who needs the full picture instead of the headlines. Of the 7 questions we laid out tonight, which one do you think will actually get answered? And which one do you think never will? Tell us in the comments. We read every one. If you're new here, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. The moment there's another update in this case, an autopsy result, an official statement, anything new, we'll bring it to you. Nolan Wells left home on July 4th, expecting to come back. Somewhere between that boat leaving the dock and a ranger finding him 2 days later, something happened that 7 questions still can't explain. What do you think really happened in those missing hours?